Heroin is an illegal, pain-killing opioid used for its euphoric effects. The root of all opioids is the opium poppy plant. Opium poppy has been cultivated for thousands of years, and was known to the ancient Sumerians as the plant of joy. Opium poppy is used to create morphine, which is then further refined to create heroin. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, in 2015, over 4 million people over the age of 12 had used heroin at some point in their life. And not only is heroin highly addictive, it's also extremely hazardous to users. So as heroin becomes more popular, there are more heroin-related deaths, especially ones caused by an overdose. An overdose occurs when more heroin is used than the body can handle. But what exactly happens during an overdose? Why is it so dangerous? Well, it's all because of how heroin affects the central nervous system. Heroin slows down the central nervous system and inhibits pain receptors, which creates a feeling of euphoria. Breathing and heart rate slow down in response to the depression. This can cause heroin users to fall asleep. While sleeping, lungs and heart rate slow even further. Oxygen levels drop. The body essentially forgets that it's supposed to be breathing. Victims then die from lack of oxygen in their body. The first 3 minutes are the most important for someone who is overdosing. In the first 3 minutes without breathing, if someone is resuscitated, they can hope to walk away unscathed. But after 3 minutes, that hope diminishes. After 5 to 10 minutes of not breathing, severe, permanent brain damage takes effect. So even if someone survives the overdose, they can be permanently disabled. So how do you know if someone is having an overdose? There are several signs that someone is overdosing. The most common are slow, shallow breathing, or not breathing at all, bluish skin and lips and blue nails, weak pulse, and small pinpoint pupils. While heroin is dangerous on its own, it's more dangerous in the presence of other drugs. Even someone with a high tolerance to heroin and other opioids can die from what is called polydrug use. Many people have heard the term speedballing. This is a mixture created by combining heroin with a stimulant like cocaine. This combo is incredibly euphoric, but it's also incredibly lethal. And deadly combinations don't have to be so intense. Just having a few beers in combination with heroin can cause an overdose. This contributes to why so many experienced heroin users have overdoses. They feel comfortable with the amount of heroin they use, but the high isn't as dramatic as when they first started. They look to drinking or using other drugs to get a better high, which can cause more damage than using heroin alone. Actor Philip Seymour Hoffman died at age 46 due to an overdose. Now, Hoffman died from a combination of heroin, benzos, cocaine, and amphetamines. He was found with a syringe in his arm on the floor of his bathroom. Addicts need more intense doses of a drug to keep getting the same high as when they were first used. Hoffman probably wasn't feeling a huge effect from the drugs he was using, due to his experience and tolerance. This, however, didn't stop his respiratory system from failing. Chasing a bigger heroin high by adding more drugs to the mix is a deadly combination. Heroin purity is also a factor in overdoses. Using heroin is like playing Russian roulette. Many addicts can go for years without experiencing an overdose. Heroin is illegal and therefore unregulated. It's a gamble every time it's used because there's no way of telling what exactly is in the batch being bought. Dealers often cut heroin with water-soluble substances to make a bigger profit. This increases the size of the batch, but also cuts the potency of the heroin down. Now, since heroin is dealt on the street and it's unregulated, the potency varies from batch to batch and from dealer to dealer. This creates a dangerous situation. A heroin user may grow accustomed to the amount of heroin that they use, and become overconfident when smoking, shooting, or snorting it. If they try a batch of heroin that's stronger than what they're used to, they can easily overdose. And there's no perfect way to tell how potent the heroin is until it's used. Just by sight alone, it's impossible to know what the purity of the heroin is, or what it's cut with, or if there's any other drugs included in the mixture. Another hazard for heroin users is heroin being cut with fentanyl. Fentanyl is an extremely potent opioid. It's several times more potent than heroin. Medicinally, fentanyl is prescribed to patients with severe chronic pain or patients that have built a resistance to other opioids. Fentanyl-laced heroin is undetectable. The user has to test the product to know if it's even there. Unfortunately, many heroin users don't take that precaution. They use as they normally would, and they're blindsided by the power of the fentanyl, and that surprise can be deadly. Fentanyl is popping up more and more as time passes. Between 2013 and 2014, the DEA reported that there was almost a 400% increase in seized products containing fentanyl. And in April 2016, British Columbia, Canada, had to announce a state of emergency because of the amount of fentanyl-related deaths. Fortunately, there is a reliable way to counteract an overdose. Naloxone, commonly known as Narcan, reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. Naloxone attaches to the parts of the brain affected by opioids and blocks them off. This stops the overdose in its tracks. Naloxone typically works in minutes and continues to save lives as opioid abuse skyrockets. Some states are even allowing naloxone to be sold over the counter to help stifle the amount of overdose deaths. While naloxone prevents death, it doesn't cure addiction. And with heroin addiction, there's always a risk. No matter whether someone is taking heroin for the first time or the 100th time, there's a chance of them overdosing. A study by the New York Academy of Medicine actually found that it's more common for experienced users to have an overdose rather than new users. Using other drugs and alcohol in addition to heroin creates a perfect storm that leaves death in its wake. There will be times when medical response isn't fast enough to administer naloxone. The only true way to avoid death is to be abstinent from heroin completely. When it comes down to it, the high just isn't worth the risk.